April 19th, 1945. The skies over Czechoslovakia. A blond German pilot with a boyish face climbs into his Messerschmitt Bf 109 for what will be his final combat mission of World War II. In the past 3 years, he has shot down 352 enemy aircraft. 352. That's more than any fighter pilot in human history, before or since. More than the Red Baron. More than any American ace. More than any British pilot. More than anyone who has ever lived. And here's what makes it impossible. He did it using a tactic that defied every principle of aerial combat his instructors had taught him. A method so reckless, so counterintuitive, that when he first tried it, he nearly got himself killed. He flew so close to enemy aircraft before firing that he could see the rivets on their fuselages. 20 meters, 65 feet. Close enough to read the fear in the enemy pilot's eyes through the canopy glass. Every fighter ace in history maintained distance. Used deflection shooting, calculated angles and lead times. Not him. He waited until the enemy plane filled his entire windscreen, until collision seemed inevitable, until his wingmen screamed at him to break off. Then he fired. 2-second bursts. That's it. And it worked. Again and again and again. 352 times. The Soviets called him the Black Devil. They offered rewards for his capture. They painted the underside of his aircraft's nose bright red so their pilots could identify him and flee. Think about that. An entire air force, millions of men, terrified of one 22-year-old kid who looked like he should be working at a bakery. His German squadron mates called him Booby, the kid. Because even after 200 kills, even after Hitler himself pinned the diamonds to the Knight's Cross around his neck, he still looked like a teenager. And today, right now, most people have never heard of Erich Hartmann. The deadliest fighter pilot who ever lived returned to obscurity, spent 10 years in a Soviet prison camp, came back to fly for West Germany, got forced into early retirement, and died working as a civilian flight instructor. His medals in a case. His story mostly forgotten outside aviation circles. All because he mastered something the experts said was suicide. Let's go back to the beginning. April 19th, 1922. Weissach, Württemberg, Germany. A small town in the southwest, still reeling from the First World War's devastation. Erich Alfred Hartmann is born to a doctor father and a mother who happens to be one of Germany's first female glider pilots. Already, the seeds are planted. His mother, Elisabeth Wilhelmina Machtolf, learned to fly in an era when women didn't do such things. She'll teach young Erich to fly gliders when he's just 14 years old. But first, the family has to survive. Germany in the 1920s is an economic nightmare. Hyperinflation, unemployment, desperation. Erich's father, also named Erich, makes a decision that seems insane. He moves the entire family to China, WWII, on the Shandong Peninsula. They'll stay there from 1928 to 1929, trying to escape the economic collapse. It doesn't work. They return to Germany, settling in Weil im Schönbuch, just south of Stuttgart. This is where Erich grows up, not in a military family, not in a tradition of warriors, in a family of survivors, scrambling to make ends meet during the worst economic crisis in modern history. He has a younger brother, Alfred, who will also become a Luftwaffe pilot. But in 1936, when Erich is 14, his mother takes him to the local gliding club. She teaches him to fly, not powered aircraft, gliders, silent, engineless planes that ride thermal currents like birds. This is where Hartmann learns to read the sky, to feel the air, to understand lift and drag and the invisible forces that keep metal and fabric aloft. He's good at it, naturally good. By the time he's 18, in 1940, Germany is at war, and Erich Hartmann makes a choice. He joins the Luftwaffe. October 1940, Hartmann begins his military training. He's not physically imposing. Average height, lean build, that boyish face that will earn him the nickname Booby. He doesn't look like a warrior. He looks like someone who should be stocking shelves or studying accounting. The Luftwaffe training program is brutal. Germany is expanding its air war on multiple fronts. They need pilots, fast. But they also need them to be good. The washout rate is high. Hartmann progresses through basic training, then moves to fighter pilot school. And here's where the problems start. He's reckless. During training flights, he pushes his aircraft too hard, takes unnecessary risks. His instructors reprimand him. They see potential, but they also see a kid who might get himself killed before he ever sees combat. He earns his pilot's badge, gets promoted to lieutenant in March 1942. At 20 years old, he's an officer and a qualified fighter pilot, and he has absolutely no idea what real combat is like. October 1942, Hartmann is posted to Jagdgeschwader 52, JG 52, on the Eastern Front. This is one of the Luftwaffe's most successful fighter wings. They're operating in southern Russia, flying Messerschmitt Bf 109s against Soviet aircraft. The Eastern Front is a meat grinder. The Soviets have numerical superiority, waves and waves of aircraft. The Germans have better training and better planes, but they're outnumbered. Hartmann arrives as a rookie, green, untested, and his first missions are disasters. November 5th, 1942. Hartmann's first combat mission. He's flying as a wingman, which means his job is to protect the lead pilot and learn. They encounter Soviet aircraft. Hartmann gets separated from his squadron. He's alone, disoriented, surrounded by enemy planes. He survives, but he doesn't score a kill. He lands back at base Shaken. This isn't gliding over the hills of Württemberg. This is chaos. Tracers cutting through the air, explosions, the constant fear of a Soviet fighter dropping onto your tail. He flies more missions, no kills. He's starting to wonder if he's cut out for this. Then, on November 5th, 1942, he finally gets his first victory. A Soviet Il-2 Sturmovik ground attack aircraft. He approaches from behind, fires, and watches it go down. One kill. It took him multiple missions to get there. He's relieved. But he's also learned something. The standard tactics, the deflection shooting, the calculated approaches, they're not working for him. He's not a natural marksman. He can't reliably hit a moving target at 300 meters. But he can fly, he can maneuver, he can get close. And this is where Hartmann starts to develop his method. He watches the experienced pilots in his squadron, men like Edmund Rossmann and Alfred Grislowski. They've got dozens of kills. They survive mission after mission. He asks them questions. How do you pick targets? When do you attack? When do you break off? And they teach him, not the textbook, methods from flight school, the real tactics, the ones that keep you alive. Here's what Hartmann learns. First, never dogfight if you can avoid it. Dogfighting is when two planes circle each other, trying to get on the other's tail. It's dramatic. It looks good in movies. It's also a great way to get killed. You burn fuel, you lose altitude, you become vulnerable to other enemy aircraft joining the fight. Hartmann decides he won't dogfight. Second, altitude is life. Always climb. Always position yourself above the enemy. Height gives you speed. Speed gives you options. You can dive, attack, and climb away before the enemy can react. Third, and this is the key, get close. Closer than anyone else. Closer than seems sane. Why? Because Hartmann realizes he's not a great shot, but at 20 meters, you don't need to be. At 20 meters, the enemy aircraft fills your entire gun sight. You can't miss. The problem is getting to 20 meters without being shot down first, or colliding with the target. This is where Hartmann's glider training pays off. He has an intuitive feel for his aircraft. He can judge distances. He can fly smoothly, precisely, even in combat. He develops a pattern. See, decide, attack, break. See the enemy from a distance. Decide which target to engage. Attack from above and behind, closing to point-blank range. Break away immediately after firing. Don't watch the kill. Don't admire your work. Get out, reassess, survive. 1943. Hartmann starts racking up kills. January, February, March. He's flying multiple missions per day. The Eastern Front is a target-rich environment. Soviet aircraft are everywhere. By March, he has 20 kills. By July, he has 80. 80 confirmed aerial victories in less than a year of combat. His squadron mates notice. His commanders notice. He's not just surviving, he's dominating. But here's the thing. Hartmann is terrified every single time he flies. He later admits this. The fear never goes away. Every mission could be his last. Soviet fighters are improving. The Yak-9, the La-5. These aren't the outdated aircraft the Soviets were flying in 1941. These are competitive fighters, and the Soviet pilots are learning. They're getting better. But Hartmann has his method, and it works. July 5th, 1943. The Battle of Kursk begins. This is the largest tank battle in history. Thousands of tanks, millions of men, and the skies are filled with aircraft. The Soviets throw everything they have at the German forces. Hartmann flies mission after mission. He shoots down 7 aircraft in one day. 7. Most pilots don't get 7 kills in their entire careers. He gets 7 in one day. By the end of the battle, he's added dozens more victories to his tally, and he's starting to gain a reputation. The Soviets notice a Messerschmitt with a distinctive paint scheme. The underside of the nose is bright red. That's Hartmann's aircraft. Soviet commanders start briefing their pilots. If you see the red nose, disengage. Don't fight him. Run. Think about that. An entire enemy air force is being told to avoid one specific pilot, one specific aircraft, because engaging him is suicide. August 19th, 1943. Hartmann is leading a squadron against a large formation of Soviet fighter bombers. He spots them from above, counts them, at least 30 aircraft. He has 4 planes in his squadron. The odds are ridiculous. He doesn't care. He positions his squadron above the Soviet formation, waits for the right moment, then dives. He selects a target, an Il-2 Sturmovik. He closes in, 20 meters, 15, 10. He fires a 2-second burst. The Il-2 explodes, but Hartmann is too close. Debris from the destroyed aircraft hits his Messerschmitt. Oil sprays across his windscreen. His engine starts smoking. He's losing power. He breaks off the attack, tries to gain altitude, but his engine is dying. He's behind enemy lines. He has to crash land. He finds a field, brings the aircraft down, and climbs out. He's in Soviet-controlled territory. If they capture him, he's dead. Or worse, he'll spend the rest of the war in a prison camp. He hears voices. Soviet soldiers are approaching. Hartmann makes a decision. He lies down next to his aircraft and pretends to be injured, unconscious. The Soviet soldiers reach him. They start arguing about what to do with him. Hartmann waits. Then when they're distracted, he jumps up and runs. Just runs. Full sprint across the field. The Soviets open fire. Bullets kick up dirt around his feet. He doesn't stop. He reaches a tree line and disappears into the forest. He spends the next day and night evading Soviet patrols, moving west, trying to reach German lines. Finally, he makes it. Exhausted, filthy, but alive. He reports back to his squadron. They thought he was dead. He's not. He's just getting started. September 2nd, 1943. Hartmann is promoted to Staffelkapitän, squadron leader of 9/JG-52. He's 21 years old. He's leading men into combat, and he has 90 kills. 90. By October 29th, 1943, he reaches 150 kills. The Luftwaffe awards him the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. This is one of Nazi Germany's highest military honors. It's presented to soldiers who demonstrate extreme bravery and success in combat. Hartmann receives his Knight's Cross from a senior officer, but this is just the beginning. The Knight's Cross has higher grades: oak leaves, swords, diamonds. Hartmann will eventually receive all of them. March 2nd, 1944. Hartmann reaches 200 kills. He's awarded the oak leaves to his Knight's Cross. 200 enemy aircraft destroyed in less than 2 years of combat. The numbers are staggering, impossible, and yet they're verified. Every kill Hartmann claims is witnessed by his wingmen or confirmed by other pilots. The Luftwaffe is meticulous about this. They don't hand out credits for unconfirmed kills. Hartmann's record is solid. July 2nd, 1944. 250 kills. He receives the swords to his Knight's Cross with oak leaves. He's now one of the most decorated pilots in the Luftwaffe, and he's still 22 years old. August 25th, 1944. Hartmann shoots down his 300th enemy aircraft. 300. Adolf Hitler personally awards him the diamonds to the Knight's Cross. This is the highest grade of the decoration. Only 27 men received the diamonds during the entire war. Hartmann is one of them. Hitler meets him at the Wolf's Lair, the Führer's headquarters in East Prussia. Hitler shakes his hand, tells him he's a hero of the Reich. Hartmann is polite, respectful, but inside, he's just thinking about getting back to his squadron, getting back to flying. Here's what Hartmann's typical mission looks like by this point in the war. He wakes up before dawn, eats a quick breakfast, walks to the flight line. His ground crew has already prepared his Messerschmitt Bf 109 G14. They've painted a black tulip design on the nose, replacing the red paint. The red made him too recognizable, too much of a target. The black tulip is more subtle. He climbs into the cockpit, straps in, checks his instruments. His wingman taxis up beside him. Hartmann never flies alone, ever. The wingman's job is to protect Hartmann while he attacks, to watch for enemy fighters trying to bounce them from above. They take off, climb to altitude, 6,000 meters, 7,000. They're above the clouds. The sky is clear and blue. Hartmann scans the horizon. He has exceptional eyesight. He can spot enemy aircraft before anyone else in his squadron. There, to the east, a formation of Soviet fighters, Yak-9 ES, maybe a dozen of them. Hartmann radios his wingman. They're going in. He positions himself above the Soviet formation, waits. The Soviets don't see him. He's approaching from the sun. They're blind. He picks a target, the rearmost aircraft in the formation, He rolls over and dives. The Messerschmitt accelerates. 400 kilometers per hour. 500. 600. The wind screams over the canopy. The target grows larger, larger. Hartmann's finger rests on the trigger. He's closing at incredible speed. 300 meters, 200, 100. The Soviet pilot still hasn't seen him. 50 meters, 30, 20. Now. Hartmann fires, a 2-second burst from his 20mm cannon and twin machine guns. The Yak-9 disintegrates. Wings fold. Fuselage breaks apart. The pilot never knew what hit him. Hartmann pulls up hard. The G-forces slam him into his seat. He climbs away. Checks his 6. Clear. His wingman is still with him. The Soviet formation is scattering. They've lost one plane, and they don't even know where the attack came from. Hartmann doesn't pursue. He's already climbing back to altitude, already looking for the next target. This is how he fights. Ambush, attack, break, repeat. But here's what makes Hartmann different from other aces. He cares about his wingmen. Most aces are lone wolves. They chase kills. They take risks. Their wingmen are expendable, not Hartmann. In his entire combat career, he never loses a wingman, not one. He always makes sure his wingman is with him. He always covers him. He always gets him home. This is extraordinary. Hartmann flies over 1,400 combat missions. 1,400, and he never loses a wingman. He's shot down or forced to crash land 16 times. 16. Engine failures, combat damage, running out of fuel, but he always survives. He always walks away, and his wingmen always survive too. This is why his squadron trusts him, why they follow him. He's not just the best pilot, he's the safest leader. By late 1944, the war is turning against Germany. The Soviets are pushing west. The Allies have landed in France. Germany is being crushed from both sides. The Luftwaffe is running out of fuel, running out of pilots, running out of aircraft. But Hartmann keeps flying, keeps fighting. He's now defending against American bombers over Romania. He shoots down 7 American P-51 Mustangs. These are some of the best fighters the Allies have. Doesn't matter, Hartmann's method works against them too. Get close, fire, break away. March 1945. The war is almost over. The Soviets are in Germany. The Americans and British are crossing the Rhine. It's chaos. Hartmann is ordered to retreat west with his squadron. They're flying from airfield to airfield, staying ahead of the Soviet advance. April 19th, 1945. Hartmann's 23rd birthday. He flies his final combat mission. He shoots down a Soviet Yak-11, his 352nd kill. 352. The number is almost meaningless at this point. It's so far beyond what anyone else has achieved that it doesn't even seem real. 8 days later, on May 8th, 1945, Germany surrenders. The war in Europe is over. Hartmann and his squadron fly west. They surrender to American forces. Hartmann thinks he'll be processed as a prisoner of war and eventually released. He's wrong. The Americans hand him over to the Soviets. The Soviets have been waiting for Hartmann. They charge him with war crimes. They claim he shot down Soviet civilians in non-military aircraft. They claim he destroyed Soviet property. The charges are false. Hartmann only attacked military targets. But the Soviets don't care. They want revenge. The Black Devil is finally in their hands. Hartmann spends the next 10 years in Soviet prison camps. Gryazovets, Diaterka, Novocherkassk. The conditions are brutal. Forced labor, starvation rations, disease. Many German prisoners don't survive. Hartmann survives. He refuses to cooperate with Soviet propaganda efforts. They want him to denounce the Luftwaffe. To say he was a war criminal, he refuses. They punish him. Solitary confinement, reduced rations. He still refuses. 1955. After Stalin's death, the Soviet Union begins releasing German prisoners. Hartmann is finally freed. He returns to Germany, West Germany. He's 33 years old. He's been in prison for 10 years. The world has moved on. Germany is divided. The Luftwaffe no longer exists. Hartmann tries to rebuild his life. He marries Ursula Petsch, his longtime girlfriend who waited for him during his imprisonment. They have a daughter, Ursula Isabel. They have a son, Erich Peter, but he dies young. Hartmann struggles to adjust to civilian life. He's a fighter pilot. That's all he knows. That's all he's ever been good at. 1956. West Germany is rearming. They're forming a new air force, the Bundesluftwaffe, as part of NATO. They need experienced pilots. They need leaders. They ask Hartmann to join. He agrees. He's given the rank of Oberstleutnant, lieutenant colonel. He's back in a cockpit, but it's different now. He's not flying Messerschmitts. He's flying jets, F-86 Sabres, eventually F-104 starfighters. He becomes the first Geschwader Commodore, wing commander of Jagdgeschwader 71 Richthofen, named after the Red Baron. Hartmann is training a new generation of German fighter pilots, teaching them the lessons he learned: see, decide, attack, break, get close, stay alive. But there's a problem: the F-104 starfighter. It's a fast, powerful jet. It's also dangerous. Dozens of West German pilots are killed in F-104 crashes. Hartmann speaks out. He says the aircraft is unsafe. He says the training program is inadequate. He says they're killing pilots for no reason. The West German government doesn't want to hear it. The F-104 is an American aircraft. Criticizing it is politically sensitive. Hartmann doesn't care. He keeps pushing, keeps demanding changes. 1970. Hartmann is forced into early retirement. He's 58 years old. Officially, it's a normal retirement. Unofficially, he's being pushed out because he won't shut up about the F-104. He leaves the Bundesluftwaffe with the rank of Oberst, colonel. He's bitter. He spent his entire adult life as a fighter pilot. Now it's over. He becomes a civilian flight instructor. He teaches people to fly small planes, Cessnas, Pipers. It's a long way from flying combat missions over the Eastern Front. But it's flying, and that's enough. He lives quietly. He doesn't talk much about the war. His medals are in a case at home. He doesn't display them. He doesn't brag about his 352 kills. Most people he meets have no idea who he is. September 20th, 1993. Erich Hartmann dies of natural causes in Weil im Schönbuch, Germany, the same town where he grew up. He's 71 years old. His funeral is attended by family and a few old comrades. There's no state ceremony, no massive public memorial. He's buried quietly. In 1997, 4 years after his death, the Russian Federation posthumously clears him of all war crime charges. They admit the charges were false, politically motivated. Hartmann was never a war criminal. He was a fighter pilot who did his job. But by then, he's been dead for 4 years. The exoneration means nothing to him. Here's what Erich Hartmann's story tells us. Greatness doesn't always look like we expect. Hartmann wasn't physically imposing. He wasn't a natural marksman. He wasn't fearless. He was terrified every time he flew. But he had something more important than any of those things. He had a method, a system, a way of doing things that worked for him. And he stuck to it, even when it seemed crazy, even when it violated every principle he'd been taught. The standard doctrine for fighter pilots was to engage at distance, use deflection shooting, calculate angles. Hartmann couldn't do that. He wasn't good at it, so he found a different way. Get close, so close that you can't miss, so close that you can see the enemy pilot's face. It was terrifying. It was dangerous. It was also devastatingly effective. 352 times. And here's the other thing. Hartmann understood that survival mattered more than glory. He could have been more aggressive, could have taken more risks, could have chased higher numbers, but he also could have died, like so many other aces did, like so many other pilots did. Instead, he flew smart. He protected his wingmen. He came home. Every single time. 16 forced landings. 16 times he climbed out of a wrecked aircraft and walked away. That's not luck. That's skill. That's judgment. That's knowing when to attack and when to break off. The Soviets put a price on his head. They painted warnings about him. They told their pilots to run if they saw his aircraft, because they knew that engaging Hartmann was suicide. He was too good, too precise, too patient. He would wait for the perfect moment, and then he would strike, and you would be dead before you even knew he was there. After the war, Hartmann could have become famous, could have written books, could have gone on speaking tours, could have become a celebrity. He didn't. He went to prison for 10 years. Then he came back and flew for the West German Air Force. Then he retired and taught people to fly. He lived a quiet life, raised his family, died in the same town where he grew up. His medals stayed in a case. Most people never knew who he was. The most successful fighter pilot in human history. 352 kills. A record that will almost certainly never be broken. Modern air combat doesn't work the same way. Missiles, radar, beyond visual range engagements. The era of dogfighting is over. Hartmann's record is untouchable, and yet he's mostly forgotten. You know the Red Baron. You know Chuck Yeager. You probably don't know Erich Hartmann, and that tells us something important about how we remember history. We remember the people who fit our expectations, the people who look like heroes, the people who have good stories. We forget the people who just did the job, who were the best at what they did, who survived and went home and lived quiet lives. Hartmann's method, see, decide, attack, break, wasn't just about aerial combat. It's a philosophy. It's about knowing your strengths and your weaknesses. It's about finding what works for you, even if it's not what everyone else does. It's about discipline, about patience, about waiting for the right moment instead of forcing things. It's about survival, about making sure you and your people get home. Hartmann flew 1,400 combat missions. 1,400. He was shot down 16 times. He never lost a wingman, not once. Think about what that means. In the chaos of aerial combat, with hundreds of variables, with enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire and mechanical failures, Hartmann always brought his wingman home. Always. That's not just skill. That's character. That's leadership. That's caring about the people who depend on you. The Luftwaffe gave Hartmann every decoration they had. The Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords, and diamonds. The German Cross in gold. The front flying clasp in gold with pennant. The honor goblet of the Luftwaffe. Adolf Hitler personally shook his hand and called him a hero, and then the war ended, and Hartmann spent 10 years in a Soviet prison camp. And then he came back and flew jets for West Germany. And then he got forced into retirement because he wouldn't stop complaining about unsafe aircraft. And then he taught civilians to fly. And then he died. And most people never knew his name. That's the inversion. The most successful fighter pilot in history. The man with 352 confirmed kills. The man who terrified an entire enemy air force. The man who developed a combat method so effective that it's still studied today. He ended up teaching weekend pilots how to fly Cessnas. He died in obscurity, his medals in a case, his story mostly forgotten. Because heroism doesn't always lead to fame. Success doesn't always lead to recognition. Sometimes you do the impossible thing. You break every record. You achieve what no one else has ever achieved. And then you go home, and you live a normal life, and you die, and the world moves on. Erich Hartmann proved that you don't need to be physically imposing to be the best. You don't need to be fearless. You don't need to follow the conventional wisdom. You just need to find what works. And then do it, again and again and again. 352 times, until the war ends, until you go home, until you become just another old man with a case full of medals that nobody asks about. That's the real story, not the kills, not the decorations, not the fear he inspired in his enemies. The real story is what happened after. The quiet life, the obscurity, the fact that the deadliest ace who ever lived ended his days as a civilian flight instructor in a small German town, and that almost nobody remembers his name.